This is the wireless way, where mobility, IoT, and innovation drive real business outcomes. Hey, welcome to another episode of The Wireless Way. I'm your host, Chris Whitaker, and yeah, I'm still grateful, man. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful you're here, and I'm equally grateful for Hyoun Park. He's my guest today, and he's a market strategist and go-to-market leader with over 20 years of experience driving enterprise technology adoption. Currently, he's the VP of Telecom and Mobility at Calero. He owns the global go-to-market execution and revenue growth for the industry's leading technology, expense management, and managed mobility platforms. This is the wireless way. And man, this is a big part of the conversation is that. So we're going to dig into that. As a former CEO and founder of Amalgam Insights, he served as a principal analyst, directly influenced over 500 million enterprise software purchases. He's a recognized expert in FinOps and agentic AI governance. We're going to get into that. I love talking about anything AI. He helps organizations bridge the gap between complex autonomous technologies and fiscal accountability. Again, something we need to be comfortable talking about. He specializes in supporting the land and expand motions. Love that. And ROI frameworks that enable transformation technology deals in high stakes environments. And in addition, he holds an MBA from Boston University and an undergraduate degree from Amherst College, bringing that unique multidisciplinary perspective to the intersection of ethical AI and enterprise efficiency. And if you've been listening a while, you know one of my favorite words is efficiency coupled with effectiveness. You can have one without the other, but man, let's get both of them. Let's be efficient and effective. So with that, Hyoun, thank you for being here, man. I'm so glad we're able to get you on the show to talk about all these awesome topics.
Howdy, Chris. Pleasure to be here. I feel so smart now that you gave that introduction. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. Isn't it odd when you hear someone else, let's face it, we've been doing this for a while, right? So, I mean, we should have accomplished a few things by now, and you clearly have done that. That is an impressive background, and I'm really grateful to have you because I tell people it's like I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I want to stand next to the smartest guy in the room, and I want to try to learn as much as I can. Wow. So, as always, my first question I love to ask: we got this professional bio. Again, sounds great, man, but there's so much more to you. There has to be. What's not the bio? What else can you tell us about your journey?
So it's funny. I, of course, try to keep my professional bio focused on the technology, the business advice. Sure, I've got an MBA. I've been in mobility for a long time, but I really started my career. I had a women's and gender studies degree out of college. Currently kind of controversial, I know, but be that as it may, it taught me a lot about women, which is useful because half the people I work with are women. So that's really useful. I was a musician. I used to be a cellist. I sang in a touring a cappella group for most of my 20s. So I spent a lot of my 20s trying to figure out, am I going to be in music? Am I going to be an academic? Am I going to work in politics? And I ended up getting into tech because I worked for a telecom company, found, hey, I'm pretty good at it. I like working with the data. I like working with the software. There's all these interesting security issues. And then when the iPhone came out, it's like, wow, like it just opened up things so much from the old BlackBerry and Symbian world that used to describe enterprise mobility. And that was good too. But once the iPhone came out and the apps came out, it just became this entirely different world that really ended up taking over my professional life in a good way. It was a real challenge. So I find all these pieces come together when I think holistically about mobility, not just as a business tool, but also as a personal tool and all the things that come into play as we think about managed mobility and the bigger picture of IT and technology in business.
That's interesting. I'm so glad I asked that question because I didn't expect that. So that leads me to an obvious next question. Do you still play and perform, or is it a hobby, or you just kind of moved on? What's the story there?
So I still play the cello for fun. I'm in the Oakland Symphony chorus where we sing stuff like Beethoven's Ninth or Mozart's Requiem or, all the big fancy classical pieces, as well as being Oakland, of course, a city with a proud, I would say, Black history. We look at Black composers that might have underlooked musical pieces as well. And it's a joy to be able to bring out some of these pieces that aren't necessarily performed every day or every year by the big symphony orchestras.
Wow. Well, I don't I don't talk about myself hardly enough. I feel like that sounds funny. I don't talk about myself much on these shows, is because it's not about me, it's about you. But we have something in common. I have performed with the Washington National Symphony.
Oh,
Have you done any Tchaikovsky?
yes.
So I've done, this is kind of tongue in cheek.
Mhm.
Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. I performed with them on 4th of July in Washington, D.C. at the base of the Washington Monument while
Mhm.
fireworks are going off. And the rest of the story is I was actually in the Army and I was in the Presidential Salute Battery. So I played the cannon. And if you know
Oh,
Tchaikovsky's 18, da, 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 dun, dun, so there's several cannon volleys in the actual piece. So we actually had a conductor from the symphony standing next to the officer in charge telling us when to fire the cannons in, with the proper music timing. So yeah, that's kind of my, my icebreaker that I've performed with classically trained symphonies, Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. And of course, the main skill was pulling the lanyard to fire the cannon. So by
yep.
no means classically trained cannon fire. Anyway, it was a great time. I got to tell you, you don't get more patriotic than that. You were in our dress blues. And, I mean, you're surrounded by
Mhm.
thousands of people. It was really a fun time. So anyway, back to the show now.
Amazing.
So one thing I was really excited about bringing you on, again, the wireless way. I work with technology architects, and I have been for years, about how to pivot and evolve and solve more business problems for customers. And I'd be curious to get your take on, especially for listeners that maybe aren't as familiar with TIM and WIM, all these different acronyms, MIM. I mean, just depending where you're coming from, but that technology expense management and the mobility expense management or wireless expense management, how do you define the evolution of these technologies over the years and where we are today in 2026?
Yeah. So I'll start with TEM. So I would say that practically everybody in IT has been introduced to TEM as this idea of telecom expense management, the idea that you need to manage your bills to support the likes of AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile or Vodafone and other carriers if you're overseas. Makes a whole lot of sense. These are complex bills. When you see your own phone bill, it is loaded with surcharges. And when you get 10,000 people in your company, it just gets 10,000 times larger. I cut my teeth professionally on looking at 8,000 page bills and going through those every month with a combination of spreadsheets and PDFs and scrapers and all of this stuff, just trying to figure out whether it was even close to what we were supposed to be paying. So that in and of itself is a practice. And of course, that goes along with things like call accounting, where you can see each individual call that is made on your landline or unified communication systems. You can track the usage, you can track texting, things like that, to make sure the usage lines up with whatever you're planning to do. So, of course, that's important in and of itself. There's still massive savings opportunities. There's big differences between high quality and low quality, global reach versus national reach. But there's a bigger picture now, right? Because we think about the bigger picture of IT. You've got SaaS, you've got your apps, you've got AI, you've got cloud, you've got data center, all these servers and routers and hardware and all these other things that also need to be tracked at a cost center level and employee level, office level, project level. And so there's this bigger picture of how do you manage your technology? Call it the 60% of IT that supports employee productivity. And it starts with this thing right here and the apps that go along with it, the services that go along with it. That takes a lot of work. And so I think that companies really need to think about TEM as a bigger picture of technology expense management with the goal of really supporting anything that has a connection or anything that does any sort of computing.
Excellent. Have you seen any change in the adoption rate for, again, being a wireless guy here, for wireless expense management? I mean, we see the device creep. We're seeing the devices with SIMs in them popping up everywhere. Are you guys witnessing any influx or decrease, or is it flat on the adoption of WIM and managed mobility?
I think so. Honestly, we're seeing an increase right now. And I'll be honest, for a while, the demand was kind of flat, but there's an increase happening right now for a variety of reasons. One is simply around security, understanding that if you have a corporate owned device, it is easier to control the profile, control the consistency of the device that is being used to manage apps, easier to create profiles, easier to control role-based and area-based and regional access control associated with the device. So all these lead to it being a little bit easier to use corporate owned devices and to be able to manage that expense overall. I would say a second issue is around being able to treat mobility as an asset overall, thinking about, think this from a financial perspective. So not just saying this is going to be something that we're going to hide under expense accounts, but mobility is something that is a multi-million-dollar expense that we need to think about as a strategic investment in our company across the board. So we see that happening as well. And honestly, there's increased nuance with these wireless bills starting to happen again. For a while, everybody just said, okay, we're just going to do unlimited plans. And that seems to be okay. But increasingly, there are more little charges that are coming into play between apps, between usage patterns, and then also being able to go across countries, international roaming, issues like that coming up again to a greater extent. And all of this is leading to greater demand for wireless expense specifically, and the ability to look at all of that in conjunction with the other strategic and operational aspects of mobility. So we know about, endpoint management and security, and simply the risk of being able having endpoints that are not well managed and might be a risk for getting into systems.
We'll be right back.
Imagine the power of a single cell phone, just one small device destined for more than just calls. I'm talking about cell phones for soldiers. Your retired phone can be a lifeline for veterans and heroes truly in need. Since 2004, this remarkable nonprofit has transformed over 25 million donated phones into more than 450 million free minutes for service members and veterans, reconnecting them with the voices that mean the most. Your donation is kindness in action, reducing electronic waste and empowering those who served. Each device helps fund urgent communication, calling cards, and programs that rebuild connections, restore hope, and unlock new opportunities for veterans. Check the drawer. Your unused phone could make an extraordinary difference. Simply send it in or drop it off at one of the thousands of locations nationwide and give someone the chance to reach loved ones. Visit cellphonesforsoldiers.com today, because even a single device can spark life-changing connections for veterans all across the country. That's cellphonesforsoldiers.com. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I get phone calls occasionally from our trusted advisors, our technology architects, and they're like, "Chris, I have a customer, and in Germany and UK, and they need a new cell phone provider. They don't like their rates. They think their bill's too crazy." And I'm like, "Okay, first of all, let's slow down a little bit. How about they just stay where they are, and then we layer on someone because the problem is no one's managing the bill, no one's auditing the bill. Maybe if you negotiate a great contract, if no one's manually moving these devices between the plans that they should be on, and back to your point, I find that's a huge profit center for the carriers, is that unlimited, all the different unlimited plans. Meanwhile, the 60, 70, 80% of the companies are only using 2 to 3 gigs a month, and they're way overpaying, right? So that's that. Speaking of different use cases, where are you seeing the big wins? Talk to us about, maybe the last handful of deals you've seen come across your desk. And I'm also particularly interested in crossover sales or land and expands. It starts out with wireless expense management. Do you see, I'm sure y'all track, are they taking other services from you as the relationship grows?
Yes, I would say that definitely at Calero, we consistently see what we call cross-selling and upselling opportunities. Simply people asking for additional services from us over time as we have success with wireless and mobile expense. So for instance, we obviously also handle landline expense and have for a long time. We have call accounting customers. We also have managed mobility customers where we are managing mobile security and help desk. We also do managed bill pay. So all these services are obviously related to our support of wireless expenses and IT expenses as a whole. And we find that there's a lot of opportunity to be able to both be able to support the upsell of our own services. And of course, when we're working with channels, there's greater opportunity to go into security, into other operational management capabilities, to go along with ITSM, to look at integrations, all these other opportunities that exist to really manage IT from a broader perspective that expand from our initial mobile or wireless expense capabilities.
Excellent. With all your experience and at the C level and working with CIOs, CFOs, any of the C's there, for a technology architect that's selling your service, what are some, what are the pain points? So what are we looking for? How are we going to get the conversation started? I mean, have you found any particular angle that works better than others?
So there's several aspects that work. Ironically, although it's called wireless expense management or mobile expense management, cost is not always the key driver. Back when I was an industry analyst, I talked about the IT rule of 30, which basically said any unmanaged IT category usually has around 30% in waste. When you look at all the things that are unused or over provisioned or duplicates or abandoned or not connected to a site or a person or department. So all that waste does exist. But here's the honest truth. That is usually our first 12 to 18 month optimization period. That is one-time savings, because after that, you've cleaned it up. And if you've cleaned it up well, you shouldn't have the same problem year over year. After that, the real challenge is around governance and compliance. And that's an important point as well, because the real value in the long run is optimizing your mobile environment. So it's the right number of devices per employee, right number of devices per department or office, so that you can get the right amount of work done, and being able to do it and make sure that all of those devices are under the right governance and compliance policies. And that's a combination of cost and inventory and tracking and physical inventory management. So that it's a bigger picture story where you need a system of record to manage your mobility. And frankly, that's the real long-term value proposition from wireless expense management, saying that I have this place where I can see the financial and operational management of my wireless fleet. It is the business system of record for what you're doing with that piece of IT.
You're talking about corporate liable devices, the work phone. I want to pivot just a little bit on BYOD, bring your own device. What are you seeing there? I got my own opinions on it, but in the past, companies would get rid of their 1,000 phones because they didn't want to deal with the headaches. They didn't deal with that 30% overspend. They just say, we'll give you a $50 or $70 stipend. Without putting words in your mouth, tell us more. What's your observation on the BYOD environment versus corporate owned?
Yeah. So it is a little trickier, because although BYOD is superficially simpler, you would think, because you can just hand out a $50 check every month and have it taken care of, you then have to think about how you're managing mobile security, how you're managing how you're making sure these devices are updated to support even your own corporate apps, like access to Microsoft or Salesforce or NetSuite or what have you via the device. How are people being updated and upgraded to be able to take advantage of the latest and greatest that exist for each version of your app or for new device capabilities? You also have to think about whether, frankly, you are doing this in an economically intelligent way. Is $50 or $70 really the right amount? It could be that you're overpaying by a ton, or it could be vice versa. You're only giving $20. So everybody says, well, I'm not even going to bother with corporate policies then. I'm just going to do my own thing with my own device however I want. And then you lose all control of anything happening in your business via a mobile device, which is not a great direction to go in either. So it's not that BYOD can't work. We have plenty of customers that we support that do BYOD, and we handle the expense management and we handle those reimbursements and handle that from a transactional perspective, as well as handle the inventory to make sure we have an idea of who's got what. But it also means you have to do more work from a policy perspective. You have to, and honestly, the user has to give up a little more control, or you have to figure out some way to create, say, a corporate profile to go along with the personal profile, or you take perhaps a dual SIM approach or a multi SIM approach to make sure that you are separating both sides and not putting the user in a position where they might have to wipe their entire device, including all their personal contacts, if something bad happens.
That's right. That's right. Well, and back to your point, I mean, so, what I've seen a little bit is going back to the security piece. It's like there's corporate data now residing on personal phones, whether it be OneDrive or Salesforce.com or Bamboo HR. I mean, a lot of sensitive content, and you're just trusting that employee's going to delete it all if they ever leave or get fired, worst case. So I'm wondering, do you anticipate or do you see a trend that maybe larger corporations getting back to corporate owned devices, getting away from BYOD? Also, to your point, $50 is a lot of money. You could get a nice data plan for $30 with a phone now. So they could actually save money, have more control. Is there an argument to be made there to go back to corporate liable, or is there, thinking back to your C-level experience, are there just some cases that BYOD just makes more sense?
Yeah, I think people make way too much of a decision on getting caught up on $30 or $40 per month rather than the cost of exposure to corporate systems, because a single breach there is a multi-million-dollar issue. So I think when you consider that, it's not really an issue of whether you can save $10 per month per device, because that's just not the right level. It is missing the forest for the tree, the individual tree.
Love it.
In this case.
Yeah, love it. I'd like to make another pivot to a kind of a newer topic. I mean, AI is all the buzz. I mean, you can't open the newspaper or your news browser or news app without some kind of AI somewhere. How is Calero using AI? How are you leveraging that to make your solutions different, better than 10 years ago?
Yeah. From a tactical perspective, I would say AI has been extremely helpful in helping to parse the documents that we have had to always build mappers to understand, such as invoices and contracts. The current generation of AI, the generative AI technologies, happen to be really great at reading text and predicting what text comes next and being able to read what happens and be able to translate that into some sort of data. So we've been using AI a lot to help with those use cases, definitely. But we also see a bigger picture opportunity to democratize telecom expense and mobile expense capabilities by providing an assistant. So we've created a generative AI Calero assistant that helps people to understand what is happening with our bills simply by typing what is going on with my invoices, what's going on with my bills, and being able to see that laid out in human language. It's no secret that telecom and mobility, we've got our jargon, we've got our IMEIs on the wireless side, we've got our universal service order codes on the wired, all this stuff that doesn't make any sense at all to anybody who lives in finance or accounting or procurement or anywhere else where you are, the normal humans, right? Not us.
Yeah.
So it's important to have some way to translate that. And the generative AI does a great job of being able to understand what people are asking for and then providing the technical information without forcing them to have to learn telecom. So it's great for casual users who want to get a better idea of what's happening in IT.
I love it. So even if an end user hey, they could type in for next year's budget, what departments do we need to, analyze further to ensure we're getting the most payback, or, there's so many things around budgeting, right? But it's more of a tool than it was prior. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. And even just basic things like your departments might be defined as 132 and 158. and you want a plain language accounting of what that means, you can ask what departments are covered in this invoice in human language, and it'll tell you, oh yeah, that's the HR bill, or that's the sales and marketing go to market account that was set up for Verizon.
I like
And
that.
just being able to provide those phone numbers and those departments and being able to do those basic translations without forcing you to memorize every number and jargon based detail that is out there.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So kind of going back to your bio about ethical AI and enterprise efficiency in general. I mean, just what's your opinion on what's the one mistake or companies making right now when evaluating AI driven operational tools? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh gosh, I have so
And
many
where to
thoughts on that.
begin?
Let's go into my thesis on Markov chain optimization strategies. No.
We only have 15 more minutes. So
Right. No, but I do want to take a kind of quick step back there because I was joking about Markov chains, but Markov chain is basically just an idea that anytime you are doing something like anytime I'm in Boston and I step on ice, there's an 80% chance I will take a step, 20% that I will slip and fall. But looking at that's a very simple version of a Markov chain where we've decided there's a probability that something will happen. The AI that we see is just a very complex version of that. So when it sees like the word there's a 2% chance that the next word will be quick, 1% chance that the next word will be red. I don't know. That's literally how it's being shaped. And there's billions and billions of these assumptions that are being made. So first of all, that's all that we've got from a generative AI perspective. Like that's what's happening. It's not intelligence. It is a fixed model that is being updated very often, but it's a fixed model that's just making these types of metrics based assumptions across the board at very broad scale. So it means that you have to think a lot about which AI models are being updated with the sources that matter to me, or how do I restrict the use of this model so that it only takes into account the data that I really care about? Because with those billions and billions of assumptions, it is very easy for AI to get lost or make assumptions that really have nothing to do with what the company cares about. So I would say the biggest issue with AI is simply making sure that it is tightened down to provide the actual results that you're looking for. And a lot of that is around data control, data governance, and testing deeply to make sure that the AI technologies that are probabilistic or they can make outcomes that are change over time and are not always consistent in nature into more deterministic outcomes. So something that is more predictable, something where you ask 1 + 1, it always tells you 2, instead of not being sure if you put ONE plus ONE instead of 1 + 1.
Right. 'Cause I even get a call sometimes with end users and technology architects, and the end user will be the director of IT or CIO, and they're like, "Well, we got a mandate from the board. Our board wants us to implement AI."
Sure.
Okay, what do you mean by that? What problems are you trying to solve? So that's interesting. That do you feel like it's overhyped? I mean, are we making more of this than we should, or should we make more? Should we make more of it?
So I think it's both. It's overhyped and underhyped. It's
Yeah.
overhyped in that we are spending billions and billions of dollars, and it is sometimes hard to figure out what exactly we're spending money on other than to build a ton of data centers. But it's hard to ignore because obviously every major platform has some sort of AI in it right now. And the AI has been really helpful in parsing information and getting information to people more quickly and helping people to make decisions or to take action or to do something with all that data that has been hiding in a platform and usually only available to experts. That part I think is real. And then when you look at developers and programmers right now, it's amazing to see what they can build with tools like Claude Code in being able to, they call it vibe coding. You kind of ask for it to build a program and you start to be able to get the straw man of what you need to build. I think the important thing there is that you have to remember that just because it spits out code at you doesn't mean the code is optimized. It doesn't mean the code is correct. It doesn't mean the code will work with other code that you might have in place. You're still going to need some level of expertise to know what has been created. And that really goes across the board for AI. You can't just take every AI output you get and just use it out of the box. There's always going to be this 10, 15, 20% of editing, fact checking, frankly, improving that you're going to have to do from a human perspective to make the AI good. It's great for taking that, getting 60, 70, 80% there, but I've yet to see AI work in any field that I'm an expert in where it gets 100% there.
That's right. Someone said it, it's still to date, the best supercomputer, still the human brain. I mean, of course, human brain helped design AI. So yeah, you're right. Use what you got between your ears. Don't second guess yourself. You probably should second guess AI sometimes. Kind of going back full circle. I feel like we, just in the last, 20, 30 minutes, we hit a lot, which is how I like to roll. Let's very impactful. We get a lot out there. I kind of want to go back to the basics of expense management for your customers at Calero. Tell me more about, what is beyond the cost savings? Why would someone want to be your customer beyond just saving money? What other features should we be focusing on, beyond savings? Because you're right. Sometimes a multi-billion-dollar company, they don't care about saving 10 grand a month. That's a rounding error, right? But what else other problems you seeing we can solve?
I think the ongoing value proposition that you can see, one is around the constant challenge of matching invoice and inventory and contracts and being able to ensure that all of that is consistent. So first of all, that means when you have a contract, it's been tightly negotiated. You probably spent 6 months working with Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile or what have you to make sure it fits exactly what you're looking for. So how do you enforce the contract going forward? How do you make sure that those SLAs are being covered and those discounts are actually showing up? That is a fundamental use case for mobile expense management and telecom expense management and technology expense management in general. Taking all of those clauses, making sure they are documented and memorialized in the same platform where you are looking at your costs and your line items going forward and being able to match those up one to one, making sure that nothing gets lost because it is so common for everyone to assume that just because I negotiated my 5% or my 20% or my 90% in the contract, that it is showing up in the bill. Well, you can leave it alone. And it's very possible that somebody fat fingered something at the end of the day. Somebody, clicked one box wrong and you don't get that. And, you can just go the next 3 years not getting the savings that you negotiated. So I think that contract enforcement is a very important piece. I also think that it's important to have a better understanding of how users are actually utilizing technology at the end of the day. So obviously with something like mobile expense management, you will have a phone number and a phone assigned to a user. Well, are they using the phone? What apps do they have on their phone? Are they texting? Are there usage patterns that they have that might be abusive on the one hand or productive on the other hand? Perhaps you can look at your top 10 salespeople. Maybe they're using their devices differently from everybody else. How do you know that unless you have usage information? You have an idea of what phone they're using. You have an idea of whether they're using their unlimited this or that. Perhaps they have some secret sauce that nobody else has been able to fully take advantage of. Maybe they have an extra app on their phone that they're paying $6 a month for that has been made all the difference. All these little things are patterns that we can start looking at if you have the data and if you're looking at charges that you might initially think are trivial. So there's an opportunity like that, I think, to really start thinking of mobile as an employee engagement and an employee productivity tool to a greater extent than we do right now. We often take mobility for granted just because obviously we all live with these, but there's still a lot about corporate behavior on phones that we often take for granted, both from an operational perspective and from a cost perspective. If that $5 a month gives you $500 in value, it's like, that's a no-brainer. Like everybody should be doing that. Everybody in the company should have whatever that magic sauce is in that department or whatever it is.
Yep, spot on. Yeah, I like the phrase actionable data. I mean, data is kind of worthless unless you can extract some kind of action from it, some kind of efficiency, effectiveness. And without your service. They're just going off of whatever the carrier sends them in that 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 page PDF. And that's not
Yeah.
helpful at all. The only actionable data there is pay this amount. That's the only action you can take. And you're just trusting this, right? And I find, I've never done an analysis where there was not savings, from wrong data plan to devices with you nailed it. Who's not even turning the phone on? He resigned 4 months ago. You're still paying for his phone though at $75 a month, and he's not even here. We don't even know where the phone is. It hasn't even been turned on. Batteries. The MDM says it's not even online. So very
Yes.
good.
Yes. And, it's almost a cliche that, at Calero, we've seen so many companies that had the phone closet or the phone drawer.
Yes.
Just,
yes.
The 100 phones just sitting there. Nobody knows who owns them, if they're connected or not. They just got collected when somebody left.
Yeah. Because you guys do kind of that secondary device market too, right? That end of life device management, lifecycle management.
Yeah, we help with that end of life, either to bring a device back and recycle it for somebody else, or to destroy it if we're working with a client that needs to make sure nobody ever touches that device or the data ever again.
That's right. I mean, it's a $40 billion industry. That's like, and you're right. So many big organizations either we got the phone for free, or 99 cents could be a 3-year contract. Mm-hmm. So they perceive there's no value, but that secondary device market, you could possibly, those companies will buy them and give you, $100, $200, whatever for these devices. And again, if you're a multi-billion-dollar company, you probably don't care about that. But, I was actually working with one time, and that was kind of their position. They're like, hey, it's not even worth our time. I'm like, well, how about this? What if we could manage this, facilitate this arrangement. We could have someone buy all your old devices, and they'll give you a check, and you could donate that to a charity as a part of your ESG, initiative, Boys and Girls Club, whatever. You could get this, $10,000 check over the year. How does that sound? They're like, wait a minute, we got a tax write-off. I mean, this is money we didn't even have to pull out of our account, So there's a lot of creative ways. I think you could do the right thing and still be profitable, be efficient and effective.
Yes.
We talked about a lot of stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, just saying at Calero, our default there is devices for soldiers, where we can provide devices there, or we can support rapid redeployment as needed. But it's really up to the company on how they want to use those devices. But there's obviously opportunities there. And it's no secret that memory is super expensive now. Everybody is sold out.
Oh, yeah.
Every RAM company has been making money hand over fist with this whole AI rush for memory. And so devices are going to get more expensive this year. It's going to get hard to make. Manufacturers are going to have times when they are out of materials. It's going to be kind of a crazy market for the foreseeable future.
That's right. I've definitely seen enough articles around. These are precious metals, or even toxic metals. You can't just put these old devices in landfills, for example, just because it's a first generation iPhone. For that someone that could recycle the materials out of it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was even talking to some guy that was taking like old BlackBerries and repurposing them and sell them in other countries where that was state of the art technology for them. I mean, they would sell for $10 to include a year's worth of connectivity, because that's just how it was going. So interesting. So I think, again, we've covered a lot, and I really appreciate your time. Is there, as we wrap up here, is there anything we didn't cover, or any last words you want to leave us with?
Let's see. I think we did covered a lot of ground. I think we've talked about AI, talked about mobility and wireless. One thing we haven't really talked about in a big picture perspective is the importance of the apps. So, we're a little biased in that in Calero, that we have a SaaS management platform as well. I do think it's a little odd that more companies don't think about both the devices and the apps and how they're managed together. Because once Apple said there's an app for that, you would think, oh yeah, the hardware and the software are inextricably linked. Yet, when you look at most organizations, these are still managed separately. And I think there's something being missed there about how you manage digital work at the end of the day. You have to go to at least 2 different places just to manage the most basic things that an employee uses to get work done. And that seems wrong to me. Of course, we are biased in that we think it should all be in one place. But even outside of Calero, it just seems that if you're trying to manage the digital business, the digital employee, the things that actually get work done at the end of the day, you should have a better way to manage that.
Wow, that was some deep stuff there. Let's pull on that string just a little bit before we wrap up. I mean, so what's your answer to that problem? Are you guys filling that gap for companies?
Yeah. So our answer is, of course, work with Calero, because we can do mobile expense and SaaS management in one platform. You just click on the left-hand side. You can do those comparisons. You can see who's got what. Frankly, as someone who's working on building a market, we'd like to have more competition, but we just don't have it. When it comes at the end of the day, it's an unfair advantage for us, but also I think a big opportunity for companies at large.
Fantastic. Well, man, I've really enjoyed our time today. Thanks so much for joining us. And of course, check the show notes. I'll have some links in the show notes for how to get a hold of your team and, of course, your website. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing all this with us.
Oh, Chris, my pleasure.
Yes. So there you go, folks. Until next time, this is Chris Whitaker. Find the opportunity, build your path, lead with purpose, and that is the wireless way. See you next time. All right. Every 2 seconds, someone in the U.S. needs blood for surgeries, cancer treatment, chronic illness, and traumatic injuries. Yet, only 3% of eligible Americans donate each year, leaving hospitals struggling to keep enough blood on the shelves. One blood donation can save up to 3 lives. With your help, we can make sure life-saving blood is ready before it's needed. If you're healthy and able, please roll up a sleeve and donate. Visit redcrossblood.org or call 1-800-RED-CROSS to find a drive or donation center near you. Donate blood saves lives. It's easy, safe, and one of the most generous things you can do.